Welcome back to my YouTube, everybody. For this week's video I am going to go through the development of another layout design. Now this one is a little bit different from everything I've ever done before, mainly because it is for O-scale 3-rail. Now a lot of people consider 3-rail to be toy trains, but hopefully in this video I can demonstrate that there's no reason why a 3-rail layout cannot be designed for prototypical operation and look just as good as anything else. Now here is the customer's basement plan. It is nominally about 25 feet by 30, although as we can see there are a fair number of obstructions. And this line here represents a political boundary because the south side of the room is being used for other things. He has some couches there, and I'm told that his wife wants to keep that furniture just where it is. Also, there are 3 columns, one here and 2 close together over here. Now, if this was an HO scale plan, this would be a fairly generous size space. But for O scale, it's somewhat tight, especially considering what the customer wanted to incorporate. He wanted 4 continuous circuits, and he wanted the plan to be suitable for prototypical operation. He has a huge number of trains that he wants the biggest possible staging yard for, and he also has a fair number of structures that he wants to incorporate from his previous layout. Now right from the beginning it was clear that he was not going to get that all on one level, and a double deck layout with subterranean storage was going to be necessary. So let's now find the first sketches that I drew for him. Here I'm attempting to indicate roughly where the main lines can go. Now this is the upper deck, because although the layout will need to be constructed from the bottom up, I designed it from the upper deck and worked my way down, mainly because the yard had to be here and there was a lot of other stuff, a lot of critical areas which had to dictate the shape of the railroad, whereas the lower deck could pretty much be any shape. We see 3 of the continuous circuits on this deck, a double track main line and a single track upper loop. We're going to start at the top level with a return loop. We have a continuous circuit all the way around the room. But ignoring this part of the circuit now, just treat it as an interchange or a spur. The main line continues down the ramp and then joins the double track circuit. And if we do the same with these 2 short sections marked with an X, pretend they don't exist, we can make another lap of the room before heading down to the lower level. So what we've done now is used all the continuous circuits as sections of a point-to-point main line. And I'm going to do the same on the lower deck. Now, although the basic footprint and schematic remained about the same, everything else changed dramatically as the plan progressed. Rather than heading under the main yard and wrapping clockwise around the room, the lower level ramp took a sharp turn, wrapped around the peninsula, and then went anti-clockwise, and the double track main line was reduced to single because the customer wanted a much bigger yard than I was able to get in with a double track. Because not only does eliminating a main line equate to 1 extra yard track in the same width, but we were able to eliminate a lot of crossovers and approach turnouts that were eating up a lot of space. So without any more waffling, let's just head over to the final plan and I can talk you through it. Here is the top deck in its final form. If you remember, I said earlier the customer had a lot of structures from a previous layout that he wanted to use, and I was able to incorporate all of them into this top deck. I got several of his bridges on here as well, and I managed to use all but one of the other bridges on the lower deck. So he was very happy with that. As far as the industries are concerned, center stage goes to his power plant with its rotary dumper. We talked at length about that, and he wanted to get a long loop track through the dumper so that he could push cars through and leave all the empties on the same track and recover them from the other end. And I was able to get that, and another long double-ended track for loads as well. He was very happy with the arrangement there, because at one point neither of us thought that it was going to fit. And although we had to use a sharp curve, I think the added interest of going underneath the conveyor certainly offsets that. The customer is very happy with the arrangement. There's also a few more industries at the high level terminus in an effort to give enough traffic so that trains can arrive and leave with different consists. Other than the double track main going to a single track, the schematic is pretty much as I showed you earlier. I also showed how at a later date we could get another bigger loop around the outside at a fairly high level, so it'll go over the backs of the couches and will not affect anybody using them. This is something that he will have to negotiate permission to do at a later date. So as you can see, I haven't even bothered to put scenery on it. It's just shown as an idea sketch at this point. And it will probably need a slightly smaller door here as well. I don't know what size door he has in this closet, but if it's a full-size one, it will have to be reduced because you can't go through like that. Let's move down to the lower level. You see this deck is mostly open scenery. There are 3 industries down here as well. He asked me to squeeze in as many as I could, even at the expense of using the 054 curves. Now this deck uses a lot of 72-inch curves on the main line, which is what he asked for. I've used 81 or bigger wherever I can. And I don't know whether it's going to show up very well, but also on all the mainline curves I start and end with a single section of the 0108 curve, which is the biggest they make to use as a transition, with the rest of the curve being whatever will fit. He's very happy that I was able to get bigger curves than he was expecting, because on the upper deck virtually everything is 81 or bigger. Here's where we used the other 2 big bridges that he had, and his Rockville bridge, which is his pride and joy. There's also extra staging on this deck. I've called it the mezzanine staging. 3 extra really long tracks, because if you recall, I said earlier he has a huge amount of rolling stock and many locomotives. He wanted to have as many of them staged on the layout at one time as possible. This industry here, I've just drawn storage tanks, a loading dock, and assume that the main structure is off stage. We've got pulpwood loading and another industry here. I've got a stream running along the front edge here and a lake here, because trains running along water always look great. And there were some locations where I was able to fit it in. He wanted several water features. There are 4 on this deck and a couple on the deck above. Both the backdrops on this deck do double duty. Not only do they divide the scene, but they help to support the upper deck. Here's the staging level. Remember, he wanted as much as possible. There's a few places where you'll notice that the track doesn't line up properly. That's because I had to do the best I could with sectional track. He's fully aware that he's going to have to cut a few sections of track in places, and he's quite happy with that. And also, by modifying these turnouts here for this ladder, we were able to get a lot more tracks in than he could otherwise. He has room for 5 really long trains here, or he can put 2 shorter ones on each track. These single-ended tracks down the west side of the room, most of them are about as long as his normal train length, and these will do for short trains. And we also have a reversing loop on this lower deck, so all his arriving trains will run through the vacant track here, around the loop, and either into one of the main storage tracks or backing into one of the stub end tracks. This area here is optional spare locomotive storage, just a few short spurs because they would fit. And the last diagram here is how the 2 layers are joined. If we go back quickly to the upper deck, we see this track disappearing under the peninsula. comes out here, makes one loop of the peninsula, and then turns back on itself, heading through the top of the lower deck seen here. So now let's take a run up from the staging yard and show you in a little bit more detail how the plan fits into a point-to-point schematic. So trains leave staging in this corner here near the stairs, immediately crossing over his Rockville Bridge through a scenic area. This crossover here is the start of the lower continuous loop, heading all the way around the peninsula, with a passing track here, and then joining up on itself here. This short cut-off track here allows trains to return to staging, which will be particularly useful during construction before he's built the upper deck. It means that the lower deck can still be operated independently. Now for point-to-point operation, this crossover is ignored, and instead of doing multiple laps of the circuit, we just head over the other track on the same bridge, disappear into tunnel, through the mezzanine storage. We emerge here by the stairs, through this isolated scene, behind this double-sided backdrop, through a short tunnel. This track here is far above the other loops through here, so I've put it on a tall trestle all the way along the front so that it doesn't block viewing. Means that the owner and visitors can sit on the couches and enjoy trains running on the lower deck without this blocking their view. Trains leave this level in this corner, head round the non-scenic ramp track to the upper deck, where they emerge here. We have a choice of routes here, either through the middle of the room or the longer route around the outside, if he ever builds it. Both eventually end up in the main yard. The yard lead here has been connected up to the main line per the customer's request. That gives him an extra passing siding that he didn't otherwise have. For point-to-point running, we ignore this short section of the circuit and instead take the back track, heading up past another industrial area, through another town with a short passing track and his oil refinery, all the way around the back, along City Viaduct over the station, before arriving at this terminus with its return loop. And the remainder of the continuous circuit, this track here, will just be used as an interchange track. But that's about it for this layout. Hope you've enjoyed watching. I hope you found it useful. And above all, I hope that I've indicated that just because it's 3-rail, there's no reason why it can't look great and be designed in such a way that it can be operated prototypically. So I'm going to sign off here. Hope to see you again next week. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.